Are Ukraine and Russia launching simultaneous blitzes against one another? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's October 21st, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get right into it. This has been an absolutely wild 24 hours on the front lines, at least according to the reporting that we've gotten. First, I guess we'll just work this in Klitschivka, right, the small town south of Bakhmut. Ukrainian forces actually launching an attack, driving Russian forces back here on the northern end. Noteworthy is the fact that they have captured a significant portion of what is likely a Russian defensive stronghold, this dual windbreak system here. We've talked for a while about the fact that Ukraine's ability to hold decisively this windbreak is going to be crucial for them, because what they're going to have to do is now turn Russian forces and seize the remainder of this windbreak, because you can see driving Russian forces eastward, there's much less cover. If they can drive the Russian forces out of here, they're going to have this canal and waterway system that's going to enable them to form a stronger defensive structure. And Russia, by contrast, is going to have lots. Look at all this open terrain they're going to have to cross and try to establish defensive lines in. It's going to be a really tough nut to crack, and will probably result in a much greater ability of Ukraine to surge towards these Opitna, and ultimately achieve maybe their goal of encircling Bakhmut, but that's a long way off. Now, on the other side, you of course have the Russian efforts near Krasnohorivka. You can see here that their offensive, again, grinding forward, making very small advances, but roughly comparable in size to the Ukrainian advances, right? This is about 600 meters here on the chart. So you could see we're talking about an advance of, probably 400 or 500 meters at most. And this is, of course, part of Russia's vision of encircling Avdiivka. But I think this is not quite the direction they need to be going. They need to be closing the pincers. This is already a very large area that they're trying to encircle. It would be very difficult to do so in the best of times. But right now, you're seeing Russian forces, by all accounts, including much of the combat footage coming out of Avdiivka, indicates that this is an absolutely massive burn on Russian men and material. The casualties among rotary wing asset, fixed wing assets, armor assets, all of it has just been staggering. And Russia needs to close these pincers. It doesn't need to go deeper in, because at some point, if you keep expanding outward, you're not going to have a pincer. You're going to have two very, very isolated little spear tips out here that they themselves will be the vulnerable flanks. Does that make sense? You see, you're almost starting to see it here in Vodiane, right? Imagine being these troops here, where you're the tine of a fork, so to speak. But look, there's Ukrainians to their south, to their west, and to their north. It's not a great place to be fighting. And unless they begin to close these pincers off on each other, that's increasingly the fight these Russians are going to be faced with. You also have a few other minor updates near two cities. First is near Novodonetska. You can see here just a minor advancement by Ukrainian forces across some low-value windbreaks, probably just a readjustment. This is also probably just a readjustment. You can see here, this is outside of Pisky, and it's also a small Ukrainian advance. Again, as we talked about, further isolating the southern prong of Russia's encirclement effort. Now, when we look over at the combat map, you can see that there's been a big uptick in ground combat, 77 combat engagements. Interestingly, these are spread across the front lines almost evenly, from Verbova to the Staromayorsk and Odozana, all the way into the region around Donetsk City. You can see Russian forces trying to advance into Avdiivka through the center, as well as through these northern and southern prongs. Russian forces trying to counterattack in Bakhmut, and of course holding Ukrainian forces in place all along this northern front in Kharkiv. So you can see Russian forces really trying to put the pedal to the metal here. I suspect that this is actually probably a function of the fact that with the conflict in Israel, the U.S. forces, there's a belief and a discussion among a lot of U.S. Politicians and the voting public, if we can truly afford to support both Ukraine and Israel. Now, I want to point out that Israel does not require that much aid. Fighting Hamas while they are a deadly organization, their budget is probably around 0.1% of the Russian defense budget. So in terms of who actually needs heavy material, it overwhelmingly is Ukraine. It seems like the number one thing Israel wants at the moment is diplomatic cover, which, the U.S., we can talk in the other videos about whether or not the U.S. is doing it. But the point is that what they're not asking for is a big fat check, which bodes well for Ukraine. But I suspect this political instability in the U.S. is driving Russia to try to exploit it with a further attacks. The problem is, of course, Ukraine's taking advantage of Russia's push for attacks by launching their own. Also, guys, I want to point out that if you signed up for Combat Vet News, I know some of the video hosting has been really buggy. It's actually an error on my part. I've been uploading raw videos and not the compressed versions that load faster. So I'm going to start definitely going forward, get the appropriately sized videos so that the members can actually, watch the videos and not have to wait forever for loading times. But if you maybe were a member before and you were like, hey, these videos don't load, next week we're going to get some that should load right away, no problem. And of course, I'm also going to go back through the archive and pull them off, compress them, and re-upload them. But that's going to be a process. So I appreciate you guys being patient with me. And of course, I appreciate your support so much. You guys know that a lot of advertisers don't want to touch this content. So I depend on you guys at Combat Vet News for your support. And literally the site is run by me and one other full-time team member. That's it. So we do our absolute best here to basically be a two-man operation to compete with Patreon, who also won't let me on their platform. So thanks again. I really appreciate you guys for sticking with me. Other than that, that's pretty much it. Institute for the Study of Wars update just talks about the absolutely eye-watering rates of casualties among this Russian Avdiivka offensive. Ukrainian staff, so grain of salt, but reporting almost 50 Russian tanks taken out, 100 armored vehicles in the past 24 hours in Avdiivka. Some are saying that number is closer to 200 armored vehicles in the past 4 days. That Russian forces are so short on vehicles that are attempting to repair damaged equipment while still in the field. So while under fire. Absolutely wild stuff. But it's an indicative of the fact that Russia probably is I don't want to say desperate, but they are fixated on this Avdiivka offensive. Also worth noting is that Ukrainian ground forces seem to, by most reports, still be in the east bank of Kherson, but it's not clear what they're doing and if this is part of a larger effort or not. It seems like OPSEC is pretty tight on it, so no updates there that I can confirm. And of course, the only other noteworthy update is President Biden trying to get $105 billion for Ukraine, as we talked about, instead of trying to piecemeal these aid packages, trying to create a single bill that's going to provide Ukraine funding for a long duration conflict. And, it's something that right now there seems to be the bipartisan support for it, maybe even more. But, this is the U.S. We don't even have bipartisan support to put someone in charge of our House of Representatives. So God help us. Who knows if we can get this $100 billion in Ukraine aid passed. Anyway, guys, that is all I had for you. Thanks to the Colonel tier members of Combat Vet News. Thanks to all of our Lieutenant tier members. Again, we're going to get this up and running, and I appreciate you guys so very much. Not just all these Lieutenant tier members, but all the members. Thanks. See you in the next one. Cheers.